94.3 The Dude is very grateful to our men and women in uniform. We're proud to recognize local members of our military by turning the spotlight on them right now in our Soldier Salute.
Welcome to the Soldier Salute. I'm your host, Ethan James, and today we're going to be talking to the South Carolina Secretary of Veterans Affairs, recipient of the Silver Star for Valor and Purple Heart, U.S. Army retired Major General William Grimsley. Secretary, thanks so much for being here. Thank you so much for your service. 33 years as an infantry officer in the United States Army. Tell me about that journey. So many accomplishments. The list goes on and on. Tell me about this incredible journey in your life serving in the U.S. Army.
I appreciate the question. It's not an atypical journey in terms of what I was afforded the opportunity, the privilege to do while I was serving. My journey probably began a little different than others because although I'm the child of a career infantry officer, my dad was a general officer as well, retired my senior year in high school, I didn't have any plan whatsoever to go in the Army. So my dad's rule was I could go anywhere I could get into for college. And my family is a big Citadel family. I did not go to the Citadel because my dad was there. So I chose to go somewhere different, but I had to take ROTC the first 2 years. That was his rule. And then I could make my own decision after that. But even as I got into the ROTC program and I was at Davidson, which is a great little private liberal arts school up there, north of Charlotte, I just didn't want any part of the Army. I'm the third of three kids. My brother was the one who was always going to go in and stay in, and he did go in, and he left after 5 years, combat veteran in Vietnam, and came up here to Carolina to go to law school as an attorney. Still, it was just never my plan. But once I decided in college, maybe it was time to grow up a little bit, find something else to do, I went in, I stayed in, and then the Army kept screwing up, kept picking me for things, new jobs, new command, new school, whatever, promotion. And I found that I wasn't terrible at it, and I enjoyed it, and I loved being around people. And, you serve, you get in with a group of people, and you suddenly start to feel like you're part of something special, something bigger than yourself, and then that becomes a part of you.
I have to ask, you said you didn't intend on serving in the Army. You didn't intend on serving at all. Was there ever a point when you were serving where you took a step back and said, yeah, this is what I was meant to do.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to do this.
Yeah, and it wasn't early on. I mean, even as a young lieutenant, young officer moving through the, jobs that you got to do, even then it was, I'm still going to leave. I enjoy what I'm doing, but I'm going to leave. Of course, I have this now wife who's with me and a kid and now soon to be a second kid. And, you have that sense of obligation that you want to provide. And I had a couple bosses who said, look, we know you're probably thinking about leaving, but you should at least stay long enough to go command a company, because that's the point at which you make the real decision. And if you're good at that and you enjoy doing it, then you should probably consider staying. If you're not very good at it, and there's always a 50-50 chance, then you probably should go do something else. So I went to the Captain's Advanced Course, Career Course, took another assignment. We ended up for 4 years in Germany, commanded 2 companies, and that's the point at which I was committed. I would be lying if I said that I planned to stay in forever, because I made my choice at that point that my career goal was going to be 20 years in the Army. I wanted to be a lieutenant colonel, have commanded a tactical operational battalion, infantry battalion. If I can meet those 3 gates, then I'm good to go. Anything above that would be gravy. I could leave, walk away, look back with nothing but pride and be happy. And I did. Almost to the day, 20 years of service, gave up command of my battalion, tactical infantry battalion in Korea as a lieutenant colonel, and walked away. But then I went to the War College and the Army picked me for promotion, and the story goes on.
Haven't had the privilege to meet a recipient of the Silver Star, the 3rd highest medal for valor in the armed forces. Can you tell me about the actions of that day? And another comment, you're an officer.
Yes.
So I assume that you were somewhere that you were not supposed to be.
So I'll counter your last point with, I think I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
And that was what a good leader would say.
So medals and promotions and schools and selection for great jobs and everything else, they are viewed as individual accomplishments because that's the only way we can figure out how to do it. But only in very rare instances are they the result of individual actions. With the exception of the young Marine or soldier who jumps on a hand grenade to save his buddies or her buddies, that's an individual action. But it still came from the breeding, the training, the natural instincts that come from being part of a team, even if it's an individual action. Same is true in my instance. So the short version of the story is I was a brigade combat team commander during the invasion of Iraq. My brigade was the lead brigade the entire time. From the day we crossed the Kuwait-Iraq border into the day my brigade seized then Saddam International Airport, because that was our fight, we had 7 to 8, depending on how you count them, major battles and engagements in those 24 consecutive days, in contact the entire time. And I was raised as a young officer, and largely by my sergeants, because I'm proud to say that I'm an officer, general officer who's raised by his sergeants. I was raised that the commander, the leader, has to be at the point on the battlefield where he or she can make the most impact. And that it's always important, because everybody wants to share good times, But you got to share the suck times too.
Absolutely.
You got to embrace the suck. So, and those were terrible days. I mean, those were hard days. I thought it was my responsibility to be where the fight was, to be very visible. And so in the course of those major battles and engagements, the way the citation reads, right or wrong, I didn't choose this, continuously and willingly exposed himself to hostile fire, knowing that it was a danger to himself, truth in lending, we dominated every one of those fights. And that's essentially the way the citation reads. If I could go back and say, why don't you just give this to somebody else more deserving, I would, and we did. I have a very highly decorated brigade combat team. I have a Medal of Honor recipient in my brigade combat team. The first one in the Global War on Terror, Sergeant First Class Paul Ray Smith, who was a tremendous combat engineer, who was killed in action the morning he did the fight for which he received it exactly 2 years to the day later. You know, it's one of those circumstances. I had the privilege to lead a tremendous organization. We deployed right after New Year's Day in 2003. My BCT ended up being about double its size by the time we crossed the border. It was quite a fight, and I was surrounded by the finest of the nation.
You were right where you were supposed to be. You're correct. You're the recipient of another medal, a very, very famous medal created by George Washington, the Purple Heart. It's a medal that carries a lot of weight. It's an award that carries a lot of heartache. Can you tell me about the actions that day that awarded you the Purple Heart?
Subsequent deployment, during the initial fight, my brigade combat team, 18 killed, 148 wounded, the most in the 3rd Infantry Division. Wow. I told you my dad was serving officer too. My dad was 31 years in the Army, retired Major General as well, and 3 Purple Hearts, 2 in the Pacific fighting as a company commander and 1 in Vietnam. And so it's one of those things, he used to joke about it, and I've used the same joke. It's one of those things nobody really wants to ever receive. The only way you get it is to be wounded or killed.
Right.
And neither of which are a great idea. Subsequent deployment, then this time of the 4th Infantry Division, 3rd Great Battle of Sadr City, which is in the spring of 2008. There was a major uprising amongst the Shia population against the government of Iraq. And of course, they're a completely different fight now. We're back in Baghdad, Multinational Division Baghdad. And we have 7 brigade combat teams on the ground, 2 aviation brigades, a whole host of people out there. This great uprising against the government, there was a major push down in the Sadr City area of Baghdad, and it was pretty ugly, quite frankly. And so we had the division TAC CP moved down there to co-locate with the brigade combat team, and it was a slog every day. We had an Iraqi Army division down there fighting as well, so we partnered with them. And I was on my way up to visit a young infantry company commander who wasn't being quite as aggressive as I needed him to be up in one corner of Sadr City, outside the city, but putting pressure up there. And on the way up there, we ran into, big surprise, a big traffic jam, which is true everywhere in downtown Baghdad. But this was different. It was on a route we'd been on before, and my interpreter, a tremendous guy named Abe, who was a Palestinian but lived in Dallas, Texas. He's got a thick Texas accent, funny enough. Tremendous guy and very close personally. And I said, let's find out what's going on. So we dismount and walk up to a string of cars. And the local police, not the national police, but the local police had instituted a problem because there's an IED on the side of the road. And they did a great job, actually. They stopped traffic. They cleared it out. There are 4 or 5 civilian vehicles in there with families. And I said, okay, so get on the radio. I said, get up there, get an EOD team down here, get a patrol, secure it. Let's take it over from the police. But we need to move these civilians out of the way. So we were in the midst of doing that. And my patrol, by the way, I had a staff sergeant patrol leader. My aide and I were the only officers. And everybody else were just tremendous, but all hand-picked great soldiers. Most of whom had 2 or 3 deployments by the time. And this is a 15-month deployment. We're 6 months in. This
was a patrol full of men that nobody should be messing with.
4 up-armored Humvees, 16 soldiers, 1 medic, 2 officers, and an interpreter. And these are great. I mean, these are great soldiers. And we were very close because we were outside the wire every day. We start doing what we're doing, and I'm looking at the IED, covered by a piece of burlap up against these concrete T-walls, next to a field of rubble, which, again, can be anywhere in Baghdad. And it looks like a pile of trash, right. Very cleverly disguised. We had a big problem up to that point because in that 2-week period or so, my patrol or a patrol with whom I was attached, visiting a unit, had been hit almost every day. So anyway, in the midst of all this, as I'm standing right by this IED, 5 or 6 feet away, and soldiers are moving people out, and the police, all of a sudden, my lead gunner on the lead gun truck, I always rode in the right front seat of the second truck, the lead gun truck yells out and says, "Sir, I got the trigger man." Because it was one of the command detonated with a wire, not an infrared trigger. And we could see the wire coming out of the back, going across this field over to housing. And he's just about to shoot, and all of a sudden, that guy clacked that thing off. The good news in all of this is it was an explosively formed penetrator, which is a hard alloy shaped charge, yes, which is what had been killing our soldiers and cutting legs off gunners. EFP. It shot straight across the street and didn't hit anything except the house on the far side of the street. But what it did is kicked up a bunch of crap, quite frankly, dust and dirt and concrete and everything else. Abe and I are the closest to it, and of everybody in patrol, he and I are the only ones that got hurt. But, it's one of those fortunate things. It busted my right eardrum completely out. Cracked the eye pro, my eye protection of my right lens, which is pretty hard to do on a pair of Oakleys. But then stitched my face, essentially, from my lip all the way up the left side of my face with concrete and dust. So, how face wounds are. You look, they're just bleeding terribly, and I can't hear anything. And the soldiers are like, you can imagine the expletive that falls after that.
Oh, yeah,
the old man's been hit because blood is pouring off my face onto my body armor, and they have no idea. I take a step back, stand up, I'm okay. The medic comes over and immediately starts. I said, look, stop touching me, I'm okay. So he just cleans my face off. So we stayed there, secured the area until the EOD got there, and then we handed it over. I never went and visited the company commander because we self-evac back to Camp Victory, Camp Liberty. I'd been nicked a couple times before. I got a little AK shot on my left elbow and one on my left shin. I got an RPG burn on my right forearm from the 2003 days. It just is. And again, one of those things unintended, and my division commander made the bigger deal out of it, quite frankly, than I preferred. But
being a recipient of the Purple Heart, as you said earlier, it's something that nobody wants, but it's there. It happens.
Yeah.
Do you share a different kind of bond with fellow Purple Heart recipients?
Yeah, everybody does. I'm always reluctant to say that it's a bond because I know so many of them and have visited with so many of them, and many of them received the Purple Heart because of actions that I directed that were truly catastrophic. Mine was not catastrophic. I have this constant whoosh in my right ear like I'm on an airplane, and I still have pieces of concrete in my face that worked their way out of the skin in the past 10 years. But other than that, I have no residual effect. I'm sure there's some TBI in there somewhere, but unlike my brothers and sisters who are amputees at best, and in many cases worse, or dead, there's always a bond, but there are lesser and greater degrees of the wounds, and it's the same metal, which seems kind of unfair to me, quite frankly. But it is what it is, and I guess what I would say is that whether you've been wounded or not, having been in combat is the greater bond, and it's regardless of service.
So many adventures. Your list of accomplishments is enormous. An Eagle Scout, head of Sigma Epsilon Foundation. You were the Chief of Staff of the Strategic Command. Of all your adventures, what is the one that you look back on most fondly?
Well, we started this conversation with saying I never planned to come in the Army, and once I was in, never planned to stay. My retirement ceremony is the 6th of June, which is D-Day.
Wow.
I chose it, and I asked, because I was at Strategic Command, which is a joint combatant command. We had an Army senior enlisted advisor, Command Sergeant Major. But I asked for my retirement ceremony to be an all-enlisted, NCO-led retreat ceremony. And so he was the commander of troops, and I had, in order, as you might imagine, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, with their senior enlisted. Looking back on that day and the 33 years, or 32 and some change at that point, prior to that, I can't imagine doing anything different in life than what I ended up doing. The fact that I can still sit here today, have a conversation with you, and say I was an American soldier is going to be the pinnacle of my life, no matter what I chose to do. I feel extraordinarily privileged to have been able to grow up in the kind of family I did, with a very traditional set of parents and a great brother and sister, to marry into an equally traditional but very strong family, to have a great education. We're all proud of our alma maters, but Davidson's a place where you learn how to think, not what to think, with open debate in very small classes in a classic liberal arts setting, are surrounded by great friends. And then to be able to have a military career, to walk out of that with my health on my own terms, my family intact. I've got 2 great sons and a great daughter-in-law and 2 wonderful grandsons. And to have all of that, it's just an extraordinary privilege.
Sir, you're the first holder of this new position created by Governor McMaster last year. Why did Governor McMaster decide that this was a position that was necessary to help the over 400,000 veterans of South?
The governor signed the law. He's given the vision for me and provided me just tons of opportunity to exercise initiative. And I've got broad maneuver space. But you got to take a step back several years and look at the many organizations, from our veteran service organizations to a wide variety of veteran supportive groups to members of the General Assembly who have been working hard to bring this about for many, many years. It finally came to the point where we had, in both houses, tremendous leaders who coordinated this with the governor, said it's time to bring this to the forefront. We really need to pull veterans out of the many places it's been, establish them in their rightful space, because if we want to continue to strive to be what we claim to be, the most military and veteran-friendly state in the Union, well, then we need to elevate this up to that point. And it's not just the position of secretary, it's bringing the whole department up to be able to give that comprehensive view of the veteran and family support, and to tie it into the support that we have for the military installations we have. So it was the vision of a lot of people and a lot of hard work. And the governor is wholly supportive of this. So in coordination with the General Assembly, who brought the law forward, got it passed through both houses, to then bring to the governor to sign last spring to go into effect at the beginning of this current fiscal year. This is the culmination of a lot of years of hard work on behalf of a lot of great people. Governor McMaster, thankfully, clearly saw this and has been nothing but the most ardent supporter of this throughout. I couldn't have walked into a better environment, quite frankly.
Taking on this new position as the first to hold it, what do you see for the near future for the over 400,000 veterans of South Carolina?
The first step is just like when you walk into any organization, you have to take stock of what's already there, what's going on, good or not good, and then make your own assessment of the battlefield, so to speak. And so I said that before I came in, and then I've used this now 90 days and some change to do just that, really to assess the lay of the land. And what I found very quickly is that what the division and subsequently department had been doing, focusing very heavily on the benefits and things that veterans have earned, is gaining greater access to that. That largely comes from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, our federal counterpart. And it goes through the benefits, claims, appeals, hearings system. And we have been very good in the course of our experiences in this organization at doing that. And it's done in partnership with the great veteran service organizations like the American Legion, the VFW, and the Order of Purple Heart, and Disabled American Veterans, and others. That's the bread and butter of what we have to do, the basics. And that's the core competence. And then the other part of that is we run and maintain the one state veteran cemetery in South Carolina, in Anderson. That core competence has to remain. So I said, first step is, if we're already doing that, fine, don't change that. I'm not going to screw up something that's already working. So let's keep doing that. And I have the team in place, and now we've sustained them to keep doing that. But that's not what we need to be doing. We need to take a much more holistic look of our veteran population, who they are, where they live, what their needs are, and let's start addressing those as a department. And most of these things are already being addressed by somebody, whether it's another governmental agency like Employment Workforce or Commerce or mental health or substance abuse. So people are already doing this, and there are a series of nonprofits out there all over the state who are tremendous, who are also picking up pieces of this, as are veteran service organizations. The traditional ones as well as the newer ones like Rubicon and Red, White, and Blue and IAVA. But nobody's pulling all this together. And so my goal in this whole thing is to not only take a holistic view of the needs of the veteran, but how do we take an equally holistic view of applying resources to needs across the state and combining this into what we're calling our campaign plan.
Taking on this position, is there any large projects that are on the table right now?
Yes. So the military, across all services, has a great acronym for how we look at change management. And we look at a problem, DOT-MIL-PF. And they go from least expensive in terms of resources to most expensive. So, and in order, it's you can make change by first looking at doctrine. How do you do something? Processes, procedures, etc. The next one is organization. In some cases, it's rearranging the deck chairs on the back porch. In some others, it's how do you move different slots to different things to cover a specific need. So doctrine, organization, training, we can train and educate, leader development, which includes picking leaders and then developing them the right way, material, people, and facilities. That's from least expensive to most expensive, .mil-PF. So the first one was, let's do a quick .mil-PF analysis of the organization. And we're applying some things across the board in each of those letters already. Now, in some cases, I've gone to the P, which are people, which seems most expensive, but I had some unfilled positions. So I've repurposed some of those positions. So already we're changing the organization. We've changed the organizational structure to more closely look at this holistic, wide aperture, wide fields of fire, look at veterans and their family members, the military bases and their family members and their infrastructure, and combining all of those into a series of lines of effort. So we're looking at how we reorganize ourselves in terms of the doctrine, the process, the procedures, the organization, and the people. Brandon over here to my left, you're right, is a classic example of that. We had no internal communication or public information system inside the department. We got to get our word out better. So I hired a dynamic young man who's a TV producer in Columbia who's well-connected, and that's his job, my unpaid advertisement. We are using some temporary positions, interns, and veteran students to fill some of these FTEs we're creating, because that's what we want to do. We want to bring people in. It gets them a great resume line. It's a great opportunity to build and give back to the same tribe we're all in. So that's a project. So we're doing some reorganization to, again, align ourselves against our campaign. We're making some process and procedure changes. We talked early on about how we're pretty good. We're a T. We're trained at the gaining benefits to the USDVA in the benefits, claims, appeals, hearings process. But we don't have one statewide software enterprise system that's used in not just in our department, that connects with the USDVA, but across our 46 county Veterans Affairs offices. So we're in a study now. We're going to pick one system. I've told the county offices that that's my responsibility. If I'm going to ask you to do something, I'll resource it. So we'll find the money to pay for it. One system, one software system that we know connects, and we've made this coordination with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to make sure that it's the right system with the right encryption that assures privacy, but also increases effectiveness and efficiency. That's how you get greater return on your claims and your benefits requests from the USDVA to get the monies that our veterans are entitled to. Get it back in the state. That's things they've earned. We're going to run a needs survey starting this summer. Some pro bono work from the College of Charleston and other places, some academics want to help us with a statewide needs assessment. We think we know what people want, but that might be way off base. You know, what are the needs people are really after, and where do they reside? Do we have a homeless problem in Columbia that we don't have in Aiken? Do we have a substance abuse problem in Greenville we don't have in Charleston? Whatever it is. But let's get the good needs assessment and then develop a system for intaking veterans so that when you leave TAP, you're in the Marine for Life program, you go and you immediately fill out a sheet. This is who I am, this is where I live, this is my family situation, this is how I feel, this is my experience, and here are where my challenges are.
It sounds like you're using the knowledge that we have as veterans. Communication is key. Communication is so important, and you're trying to get the entire state on the same page of communication.
Right, which is why I'm extraordinarily grateful to be here today.
Being the host of the Soldier Salute, I have this amazing privilege of being able to meet veterans of all age groups from all over South Carolina. And one of the things that I personally have seen in all veterans, no matter their age, is the hardship of transition. The military does a fantastic job, I believe, of setting us up for success on the way out the door. However, it sounds more and more like veterans have a hard time transitioning into the civilian world. Is there anything on the docket to work on helping this issue?
Yeah, that's another great question, and I appreciate you asking it. One of our major objectives in these lines of effort in the campaign is, in coordination with our 8 active duty installations, the Great South Carolina National Guard, the reserve component, the units that are scattered around the state, including the 81st right here in Fort Jackson, is working through the transition programs, TAP, because it's a common core, a capability. I'm working now to try and get a better forecast. So let's just take Fort Gordon in Georgia, which is right across the Savannah River from us. We want to take their soldiers who are leaving active duty and bring them on our side of the Savannah River. Nothing against my friends in Georgia. My wife's from Georgia. There are roughly 1,800 soldiers that leave Fort Gordon, Georgia every year. That's not a huge number, but of those 1,800, 61% of them come from the cyber, signals, or intel fields, which by definition means they all have top secret clearances. Many of them are also linguists, so they're very talented in at least one other language.
So you would think that these people have jobs immediately.
They might, but they might not know where they are. They're leaving the service. But what we're not doing as good a job of is immediately connecting them to opportunities in South Carolina. Let's get a prediction by quarter of people who are leaving service by specialty, by pay grade, and maybe clearance, education level, and start to use that to connect the dots with our employers in South Carolina in a more routinized, systemized format. There's another great group, and I've only corresponded with her. I haven't met her in person yet. But the South Carolina Manufacturing Alliance has been using her skills. It's a nonprofit called Ascend. It's up in Greenville. And they are happy to take a Marine infantryman, for example, and translate his experience and skills into civilian speak. Not necessarily just a resume. A lot of people do that. But to be able to translate that so that when you go to a job interview, you can speak in the language that Boeing might understand.
You're not using acronyms that nobody understands.
Yeah. Let me tell you about all the kit I wear when I'm downrange. And
there you go.
14 different abbreviations and, and do a lot of this, shooting your watch. So it's a really great system, but let's get that more routinized. It's back to this idea of getting everybody inside the big tent and connecting needs to resources. So how do we get more systematic about that? Truck drivers is my favorite example. So CDL, commercial driver's license truck drivers, are in demand everywhere in the United States, including in South Carolina. You just look on the back of every truck. Interested in joining us? Dial 1-800. Drive down I-26. You'll see 2 or 3 different major trucking companies that we're hiring. Cool. The problem is, a lot of times, because there are obviously CDL license and over-the-road kind of truckers. That's a big truck driving fast, carrying very important things, especially as we've seen in the past 90 days.
Absolutely.
So they're very important to our life. They're a huge part of the supply chain. But there's another interesting component to being that kind of truck driver is you have to pass a drug test. Well, gee, if you're in the military, first off, and you've stayed in the military to the point where you've reached your natural expiration of your term, either retirement or gotten out on your own choice, you, by definition, are reasonably fit because you pass a fitness test at least twice a year. Mm-hmm. You're motivated enough now to get up in the morning, put on your clothes, clean yourself up, keep your hair cut right, show up to work on time. You know how to say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am. Generally know how to be in charge of other people, including being in charge of yourself. So you're responsible, you're a leader, you know how to do certain things, you know how to be fit, so you're physically healthy, and you're by definition drug-free because you pass a drug test routinely, oftentimes on no notice. So just take the Army. If you're a motor transport operator, so just take the Army and the Marine Corps. So an 88 Mike, that's the specialty in the Army. If you're an 88 Mike 20, so you're a sergeant truck driver, and you choose to leave Fort Jackson, and you meet all those requirements, you also already have your CDL, most likely, or with a bare minimum, you could go pass it at DMV, and you've already got over-the-road experience, and you've been driving trucks of all kinds, from an LMTV all the way up to potentially a tractor-trailer. So you're ready-made for a job, but we don't always make that connection very well. So how do we connect this capability? Because that's the kind of soldier, Marine, man or woman, that we want to keep in South Carolina. You're the model citizen. You're ready-made to live here. And by the way, we've got a great opportunity here. The quality of life's good. We're all nice people. Climate's decent. And housing is not overly expensive. So you have a great quality of life, cost of living, tax base. So let's keep those people in. So that seems to be a ready-made sort of thing. So this will come as part of the campaign, but it's, again, how do we get unity of effort? Because there are programs over at the employment workforce. There are programs in the military on tap. There are programs through the Department of Commerce on encouraging businesses to move here, expand here. And we have tons of opportunities here to bring veteran-owned small businesses here, to bring veteran entrepreneurs to come here or stay here. Opportunities abound.
As you know, there's a laundry list of veterans issues, we call them, including anywhere from post-traumatic stress disorder, TBIs, homelessness, addiction. There's a laundry list of things that plague the veteran community. What are some of the big ones, or at least the top three, that you would like to tackle heavily in South Carolina?
Well, you named some of the big ones. So I was out at the Big Red Barn last week, for example.
I love Sutton Shaw and Lamont Christensen.
Yeah, well, he is America's Sergeant Major, first off.
Absolutely. Lamont Christensen is amazing.
Yeah, you look up Command Sergeant Major in the dictionary, and his picture is going to pop up. So, he's all that and then some. So, if I had like 10 of him, we could dominate the world forever. And again, as an officer raised by sergeants like him, Anyway, that aside. But that's a great example of what we're trying to get after across the board. So everything you listed off are the result of something. So nobody started off saying, I want to fail. Nobody goes in the Army or the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, and says, I want to be a zero. Nobody. Everybody goes in for a certain reason. Nobody wants to be a substance abuser to the point of disorder. Nobody generally chooses that as their initial course of action. Very few people say, you know what, I want to live to be 24 years old and then I'm going to kill myself. That's just not a rational choice that people make from the beginning. So all of those things are unfortunately the results of something that's happened before, or a combination of something. Whether it's a relationship challenge or a substance abuse challenge or a deployment challenge or a financial issue, all of those are contributing factors. So we got to tackle all of them, first off. So for people who are already in those situations, for somebody who might be suicidal or have the ideation or potentially even a gesture, the first step is they gotta seek help, and people who know that have to help them. So there can be no stigma associated with this. We're all humans. Everybody has failings. Everybody has challenges. It's how you deal with the challenges. So that would be step one. So we have to treat the result as it stands today. We can't ignore it. So we have to help people who are homeless. We have to figure out how to help stem the tide of substance abuse. And we're working on programs already across the government with that. And I got to tell you, my partners in the state government have been tremendous on the legislative and executive side in helping through these sorts of things. We need to expand our veterans courts into all the solicitor districts across the state too, to take advantage of that, because we're having great success in several of them. Now, to give an alternative path. You know, the fact that Brian Sterling in Corrections has veteran wings in some of his prisons, where unfortunately we have people incarcerated, but they're with other people who are veterans. That shows great success. So those kinds of initiatives are great, but that's dealing with what already is. We got to do that. We have to have the programs, we have to have the leadership, we all have to work together to do that, and all of those are very important. But I would offer that as we move forward, while we're dealing with the what is, we got to look at the what can be. And so I go back to this idea of health promotion. It's the same if you're sick. If you're sick, you need health care. No brainer. But if you work on being a healthier person through health promotion opportunities, you at least start to bring down the threshold of chances that you might get sick, or at least some of the other pitfalls. So it can't be an either or, it has to be both. So we need to tackle all of these. We need to tackle them holistically and collaboratively across the state. It's a combination of federal government with state government, with local government, with not-for-profits, with private sector, with families and communities. And again, I got a big old tent, and I'm just one part of the big old tent. There are others who are equal partners in the big tent. We just all got to be together. So it's going to be the opportunity to build the systems, the network capabilities, to bring all these to bear. And it's got to tackle both of them. It is a terrible tragedy that a person who chose to serve their country suddenly decides that they have reached the point where they can't deal with it anymore, and they take a terminal solution of killing themselves. I find that incredibly tragic. And I have unfortunately administered my fair share of post-mortem events after a suicide occurred, an active duty suicide occurred. And inevitably what comes back afterwards is somebody always knew something about it. There was always some underlying challenge that person was trying to face alone and just couldn't deal with it any longer, and made that decision. It almost always is something that's preventable. And it just takes all of us doing it together. And that's the same of a person who ends up on the streets, or a person who's going hungry, or a person who chooses to get involved in a substance abuse thing. There's always somebody who can be part of the solution. We need to be part of the solution. And in my case, I'm focused on veterans, but societally, it's equally true. So it's going to take all of us, quite frankly. But I'm just proud to be part of it. Sorry. We talked earlier about South Carolina and its desire to continue to pride itself in being the most military and veteran-friendly state. And our legislature and the governor have been great about supporting that legislatively. The recent passage of the Military Spouse and Family Member Licensing and Credentialing Act, which both we and LLR pushed hard, gives you the opportunity gives our military family members the opportunity to come to work who bring a license or a credential from another state into South Carolina and go to work immediately. That's a huge win for not just when they're serving in South Carolina, but it further endears them to what we love about all the other things we love about the state. So, getting to build that system around them. We're still working on the military retirement exemption. I pay state tax on my defined benefit. I don't mind doing it, but I would prefer not to. Other 30 states in the union don't. And when we're looking to try and attract people to South Carolina, that's something people do consider. Am I going to have a job? What's my quality of life going to be? What's the cost of living? It may not be the predominant reason. I was always going to live in South Carolina for the rest of my life, but not everybody's that way. So it is something that's out there, and it's over on the Senate side now. We'd love to see that passed, obviously. It's interesting because for those of us who are fortunate enough to have retired, regardless of your pay grade, we bring a fair amount of our retirement money into South Carolina. We're going to live for the rest of our lives. It's in billions of dollars. And that's, by the way, hurricane-proof. It's kind of COVID-proof because the United States government's going to pay us for our service, our years in service, regardless. And that's not dependent on anything else. So, for the 200 and some flag officers that are retired in South Carolina, if we live to the actuarial table of 84 years, it's a fair chunk of change. So
last question, promise. You just mentioned something that we haven't even said a word about it. COVID-19.
Yeah, we don't like not talking about it.
Yeah, I'm sure you hate talking about it. I'm sure that the governor doesn't like talking about it either. I don't think anybody does.
It is.
However, I just have to ask, all these plans sound rock solid. They sound fantastic. It's so good to hear it's a solid quality leader is up there doing the right thing for our veterans. Is COVID making it harder right now? Or are we just still trucking on?
So here's the deal. It's like anything else on the battlefield. The conditions are different every single day. So as long as you got a good, solid plan, because no plan survives first contact, that you know is flexible enough, you can anticipate contact at certain points on the battlefield in time and space. COVID's just one of those things. It's a condition on the battlefield. I might be wearing a protective mask and a chemical. I might be wearing an extra layer because it's cold. I might be hot as hell and sweating underneath my body armor. Done all of the above. So it just is what it is. So it's just a condition on the battlefield we have to deal with. And yeah, it is a pain. But at the same time, what's been interesting is because it happened, I jumped into this gunfight on the 4th of March. Literally 10 days later, we were shut. That's when I started. So, but what it's done is given me a real great opportunity to do what I needed, which is build some white space on the calendar that I could sit and think and gather a lot of information from a lot of people and build my team, because I've got a great chief of staff that I knew in combat as well, who retired out of Fort Jackson here, and he's my real campaign genius, by the way, Colonel Joe McClam, and we were both schooled the same way, same place, and so he's brought that to bear, and so now as we add more and more people, so it's really given me a time to sort of take advantage of what was kind of a pause in the lives of everybody when everybody's working remotely, still be able to do that and move forward. Now, I'm a people person, so that kind of dampens my style a little bit, but it's okay. We'll get after it.
Thanks for joining us in our Soldier Salute, presented by Little Pig's Barbecue, serving Columbia since 1963 with that bodacious buffet. And Palmetto State Armory, American made for life. And Franklin Equipment, rent, buy, rely. And Atkins Law Firm Workers' Comp Attorneys, who you hire matters.